21, like Madonna, like Angeline, faces and bodies sculpted into youthful approximations of their aging corporal forms. Forever 21, the true spirit of Los Angeles. I felt it enter me. I was possessed. I spotted it up ahead. I was close now. Only one barrier stood between us. A lady in a white smock stepped in my path and fired a stream of perfume from a glittery pink bottle. Britney Spears' fantasy, dear girl? No, I cried. An aerosol mist smelling like cupcakes hazed down around me. Leave me alone, lady, forever awaits. I could see the glimmering storefront ahead. I was practically skipping now. I imagined all my new outfits waiting for me in there, future iterations of myself to try on for size. My eyes were so focused on the prize, I didn't see the girl up ahead, and I nearly collided with her. "Excuse me," she said, smiling a friendly smile, resting her hand lightly on my shoulder. I turned around to face her. She was wearing a college sweatshirt that said Northridge across the front. Her swishy blonde hair fell to her shoulders, and her pink face glowed in a freshly scrubbed way. She had on Levi's and pastel Sauconys, and her big smile instantly disarmed me. "Hi," I said, returning her smile, waiting to hear what she needed. Directions, maybe? I stood up a little taller. Only 2 weeks in LA, and I was getting mistaken for a local, one of those mythic California girls that they write songs and movies about. This was going to be a real piece of, "I have a prophecy for you," the girl said, interrupting my fantasy. A prophecy? Here by the Sunglass Hut? Was she joking? For a second, I was jolted back to middle school, Wyoming Valley West Middle School. Was this girl bullying me, messing with me while her giggling friends watched from the shadows? But the girl wasn't laughing. She was just smiling that weird toothpaste grin at me. Sorry. "It's about the mother god," she said. I looked into her eyes then, for the first time. She held my stare there like it belonged to her. And in that moment, everything about this normal girl faded away. Her eyes were completely empty and as deep and black as a vortex. I couldn't see a real girl in there. And her smile wasn't friendly, as I had first thought. It was dreamy and unhinged. It disconnected itself from the hollowness of her stare. A slow tingle started at the tips of my ears and coursed down my body. I was frozen there, glued to the industrial-strength linoleum. I opened my mouth to say something, but I couldn't find the words. She crept in closer. I realized my silence was encouraging her, making her think I was interested. "Do you know the mother god?" she said, staring me down with those creepy zombie eyes. My brain kicked into action then, finally. It furiously computed the facts. The mother god, a prophecy, a cult. Reality blasted back into view, the tableau of normal mall life unchanged around me. An instrumental version of the Spice Girls' "Say You Will Be There" was pumping through the overhead speakers. A snatch of a conversation from two women wearing name tags floated by. The perfume lady was still there, squirting passersby. Everyone was going about their regular lives, unaware of the mother god and the cult girl and her hand on my shoulder. It felt like a 2-ton weight holding me there. Back at Bryn Mawr, I learned what to do if some pervert's following you. You make a lot of noise. You draw attention to yourself. The hall advisors handed out these silver whistles during freshman orientation with wholesome, out-of-touch instructions to fend off assault. If you're feeling threatened, blow your whistle. If you see someone being attacked, blow your whistle. If you hear someone blowing their whistle, blow your whistle. Do they?
No.
But I was not prepared for this. No one and no whistle was going to save me from this nice college girl. I had to figure this one out on my own. I pulled away from her grip and I power walked to the parking garage, looking over my shoulder the whole way, a deflated version of the girl who had strolled in. I never even made it to Forever 21 that day. For all my swagger, all my liberated woman in a new city BS I had been pumping myself up on since I arrived, The experience rattled me. It was the first inkling of doubt I had that the world outside my feminist utopia of a seven-sister college might not be as textbook as they had made it out to be. As a woman, I'm always scanning my environment for predators, but running in fear of another girl, that was a new one. On the drive back home, I checked myself out in the rearview mirror. I looked the same as any other girl in the mall that day. A pedestrian ponytail, my eyeliner beginning to smudge with afternoon. But the cult girl had sniffed out my loneliness like a dog on a fox. How had she been able to tell so easily? Was my new girl naivete that obvious? Vulnerability that shot from me like light off a mirror? I felt weak and exposed, like all my confidence had leaked out. I wasn't fooling anyone. I started second-guessing all of my decisions about coming to Los Angeles without any real plans. Maybe I had made a terrible mistake. One thing was for sure, I was going to have to be more careful on my own. I couldn't let something like this happen again. I was lonely, but not lonely enough for the mother god. A few months later, I met Ivy. Instead of a prophecy, she held out a business card. "Come join our team," the card read. "American Apparel." I took it from her hand immediately. And that's the prologue. Thank you very much.
And ladies and gentlemen, that is just the prologue. If you're not hooked already, then you're not gonna ever be hooked to anything. That is a great prologue to a fantastic book. It only gets better from there. And if you're an avid audiobook person, it is narrated by Kate. So the way that she just read that is the way the entire book is narrated, and it is really worth the listen.
Thank you very much. I'm proud of the audiobook. I recorded it in New York City. It was a very strange, unusual situation. I'm a musician, so I'm used to recording, but it was very emotional and very difficult, but I'm proud of it. It's good.
It's very compelling. You can tell.
Pat myself on the back. Thank you.
So tonight we have some questions that I don't want to be the person who spoils the book for you. So most of my questions hopefully are given in enough context that you can understand exactly where we're going without exactly giving away the entire plot of the book. My first question for you tonight, Kate, is there's a very memorable quote from the book, and it's early on in the book, but it does get repeated from time to time. And it was verbalized first by Roz. And she said on the telephone to somebody who was very unfortunate to be the recipient of this, "We're American Apparel. We can do anything we want." And I just thought that phrase stayed with me the whole time as I read the book. And interestingly, its meaning changed as well for me as I progressed through the book. From a meaning of one of empowerment and brashness, really, to one that defied professionalism and workplace laws. Was that an intentional theme that you had for that book?
Oh, sure, absolutely. That concept of we're American Apparel, this is our world we've created, and we can do anything we want, was so inspiring in the beginning. It felt like there were so many opportunities available. It was completely different than the work environment I had just come from at Urban Outfitters, which was a very stodgy, uptight entry into the fashion world. We really could do anything we wanted. There were no rules, and in the beginning, that was so freeing. But as the book would go on, I began to find out there were indeed rules. It's just the only person who knew them was the CEO of the company, Dov Charney, and they changed every day. And, it was American Apparel, and he could do anything he wanted, and it became sort of it had threatening overtones to it the more that we went along, and I realized it wasn't exactly as great as I thought in the beginning.
Yeah, it definitely took on a less empowering and more aggressive tone throughout the rest of the book. So even in your prologue and throughout the book, you spoke of this feminist utopia that you lived in when you were at Bryn Mawr. And how that may not, once you entered into the real world, been a reality for you, but actually more of a utopian society. Throughout the book, you do reference the seven sisters of Bryn Mawr and how their voice, their collective voice, whispers to you from time to time. And you do eventually start listening to those whispers. What was the first time you can remember thinking to yourself, well, maybe these whispers have something to them?
Sure. Bryn Mawr's a very idealistic feminist place. It's not like anywhere else. It is a utopia. And it's not the real world, but it's a great place to live for 4 years, It's like incredible. And what was the second part of this question?
That as you were in that utopia, you thought it was reality. It wasn't. And as the book progressed, you started listening to the whispers.
Yes. Bryn Mawr became, and this is due to my editor in a way, Bryn Mawr became the voice of reason that sort of whispered in my ear throughout. And, it was there right from the beginning. It's like your hunch. It always sort of tells you the right way to go. And a lot of times you ignore it. But right from the start, I knew that something very strange was going on. But that moment in time of the early 2000s, I was fresh out of college. These red flags that my feminist background would have normally caused me to suss out right away, because of the culture of the time and everything, I would really sort of mistake those red flags as marks of progression. And feminism was changing. It was a very different place. Sex tapes were becoming in vogue, and Playboy spreads, and young women were really walking that fine line of sexual liberation and sexual exploitation, which is a line we still walk, for sure. And messages got very muddied, and it really wasn't until things got really undeniably unfeminist before I could say, this is really crazy and I gotta get out of here.
Yeah, I noticed several of the incidences. One was the dressing room incident where you walked in on your boss, Dove, making out with a shop girl. So red flag, certainly.
Yeah, red flag, definitely.
Yeah. But there was a justification and that you wanted to believe that it was not as weird as your whisperers were telling you it was.
Well, here I was 23, I was a grown woman, I was out on my own, I knew everything. And here is another young woman who is my age, and she wants to have a sexual relationship with her boss. And, at my last boring job at Urban Outfitters, my boss was in a relationship with her boss, and I just sort of figured these things happen. Here is my equal. If she wants to get with the boss, that's her decision as a woman in this world. And that's my 23-year-old brain's interpretation of it,
I want to get back to the prologue for a second. In the prologue, you describe this being approached by this woman from a cult.
Yes.
There are two other instances in the book that arguably are parallel to those. One is when Ivy approaches you and says, join our team. And the other is when you unwittingly went on an interview for what turned out to be essentially an escort service.
Yes, that's correct.
Which you found out not too late, thank God.
Yeah, I know.
Explain to me the differences in instantly recognizing the first woman and missing it completely with the other two, experiences.
Yes, it's so tricky. Well, some people love a cult, right? Like, if you're lonely and you are looking for your twin flame, like, that's the one for you. And another person at the Galleria may have been lonely and new in town, and the mother god may have appealed to them. But I needed a job, and when they came to me and they were like, we're a little unorthodox, come down and check out our gig, you might like it. That was what spoke to me. And someone else who may have gone into the escort service interview, which was sort of, that would have been for them. Sure. And everything, those situations sort of draw in, vulnerable people. And it just depends how vulnerable you are and like what kind of situation it is. I was vulnerable to American Apparel because I desperately needed a job. And what they were selling, I was buying. It just sounded too good to be true. And it usually is,
Maybe it was.
Imagine that.
So the CEO of this company is a man called Dov Charney. I encourage you to Google this and see exactly more detail as to what exactly this
He's
man was
working with
engaged in.
Kanye West now. I mean, like, that's all you need to know. Yeah. There's
Exactly.
like videos of TMZ videos of him like ranting in the street about Kanye. It's like, you can't believe it.
Yeah. You might catch him on a few really out there podcasts as well. He's a very distinctive and irritating voice, is my opinion.
He does. He does.
But in the book, you describe several employees that were known around the company as Dove Girls. Okay, and those women routinely engaged in sexual encounters with Dove, some as girlfriends, and some plainly not. You were very clear in your drive to succeed in the company without ever being a Dove girl, and you did. So kudos to you.
Thank you.
Many men and women alike in the business assumed you were a Dove girl. This itself seems like an insult to professional women as a whole. How did you feel and how did you handle it when people assumed that you were sleeping with the boss in order to get ahead?
Oh, sure. There was one moment where someone said to me, well, Dove's paying your rent. And I was like, what, are you crazy? What do you think I'm doing here? Like, Dove has never paid my rent. And it really got under my skin. I wanted to prove that I could go to the top and get the best gig in the company by not being one of the girlfriends who got the best jobs. They were, traveling abroad and hiring and doing all the things I wanted to do. And their only qualification was that they were Dove's girlfriend. It made me proud to say I did it on my own, but looking back now, like, what difference does it? Like, that and $1 gets you a cup of coffee. Like, we were all still under his spell. I was still doing what he wanted. He was just, holding the strings. So it didn't really become a point of pride for me any longer. We were all just playing this man's game in the end and making things easy for him to do whatever he wanted. But yeah, it always stung when someone assumed, and they wouldn't even believe me, because that's just how it was.
Yeah, and that in itself is an insult to your own professionalism and expertise.
And this is, it's not a black and white situation, because the girls that were his girlfriends were often incredibly intelligent, strong women with a drive to succeed, to learn about business, most of the girls that are in relationships with him in the book are still with him to this day, living with him, working for him. In fact, all of the girls, really, that are still with him, which is a testament to something. His charisma, the good things that he's doing with his company. He's American Apparel folded, but he started another company, Los Angeles Apparel, with basically the same business model. Everything made switch-up free, everything made in Los Angeles. These girls, after American Apparel folded, a lot of them went on to sell companies. I learned so much business know-how. I became so confident. He gave us a lot of opportunities that people would never have given, a 20-year-old without a degree. A lot of the girls, some of them hadn't even graduated high school yet. And we learned a lot about the company and worked really hard. It was all about working. We worked we're like dogs. So, it's very tricky.
Yeah, I think at one point in the book, several points in the book actually, you questioned who was using who. And the interesting one was when you would overheard a conversation between two of your friends with Dove on the other end of the line, and you said to yourself, maybe they're using him to get ahead.
Yeah.
And that might be true, although they don't seem to have moved on. But it was an interesting, again, one of your internal conversations about, are they being sexually exploited or are they taking advantage of him? And that theme was very prevalent throughout the book.
Yeah, it's true. Some of the girls really could take advantage of Dove. He was like a 13-year-old boy. He would get jealous. He would shower girls with attention. He was not a normal man at all. He was just like a child. Yeah.
All right, so let's move on to a topic that is certainly goes throughout the entire book. There seem to be an internal struggle with you about your own feminist ideals, pitting sexual positivity and your own sexuality against some of the work practices that you found happened within the stores and even at the factory. It seemed to me that your internal voice or your perception of what was happening around you did change throughout the book, from one of optimism then to sarcasm, which was, of course, my personal favorite, and then finally to judgment and even self-judgment, which I think was definitely misplaced. I think the judgment sits squarely with Dove and his approach.
I'm glad to hear you say that. Because sometimes I read, like bad Goodreads reviews. You're not supposed to read them, but I read them. I have to read them, especially the bad ones. They're the best. And a lot of people want me to, take accountability for my role as a scout. I hired many, many people to work for this company. And and I do in the book. There's a circumstance of a girl I hired who I just she just ended up in the wrong, ended up in his clutches. It was real. I was new.
And this is Dawn, I'm guessing.
Yes, this is Dawn, yes. But I refuse to take responsibility for a 35-year-old grown man, abusing his employees. That is his decision, and I just have a little grace for myself as a 23-year-old getting wrapped up in that system. Ultimately, Dove is the puppet master pulling the strings. So I'm glad you put that blame on him too.
Oh, absolutely. It's not very difficult.
Yeah, it's not the girls. I just, sometimes I'll talk to other employees and they'll, feel so awful. And I'm like, we were so young too. We were all caught up in it too. You can't take responsibility for this grown man who built this world around him. And, what could we have done?
Well, and let's not forget, he held the purse strings.
Yeah, exactly.
He was the one in control.
Yes.
And he's the one who set the dynamic and the culture in that organization. So 150%, that's on him.
He gave us everything he needed. Some people would just give it all up for a Kia. Oh yeah, I'll pay your car bill.
I'd have held out for a Volvo myself, but. While we're on that topic, I want to ask you a question, and this is one that my colleagues and I did quite a bit of discussion around, and I think the question turned out appropriately what we wanted to hit on this. But at the outset, and this is a very long question, so you might as well get comfortable. Look at this. It goes all the way down.
Oh no, a fold out.
Yes. It was my little arts and crafts project this afternoon. So at the outset of the book, you're embarking on your first post-college journey, okay? And you're essentially about to begin adulting, okay? And this gets to the point you were saying that these were 20, sometimes younger than 20-year-old girls that were encountering Dove and his culture at his employment. And all college grads, when they come out, or any person who's embarking in the work environment for the first time, are find themselves in that experience, even if they're in different decades. You and I in the 2000s were in very different places. I was working for a law firm and raising my babies, and you were finding yourself. But everybody who comes out of college, law school, high school, whatever environment is more protective and nurturing, they find themselves in the workplace. And at some point we have the opportunity, or maybe even the requirement, that we make choices, and we may not even realize the choices that we're making, but it makes us feel maybe trapped in the direction we've started down. And as a new person to the work environment, you may not know that there are alternatives. And so your memoir does talk about some of these emotional and financial traps, particularly in the early parts of your time at American Apparel, and some ramifications of those choices we make. Now, this is all a very long preamble to the question, which is, with the benefit of hindsight, what advice do you have for students in this audience who are about to embark upon that very same adventure?
Sure. One thing I can say, no, that was great. That's a wonderful question. One thing I would say is, and one thing I was really looking for when I graduated was a sense of community. I wanted to be a meaningful part of my community. And when I got involved in American Apparel and that whole, we're a family. We're a family here. Like, if you get a job and they say we're your family, like, run. They are not your family. You are just getting a paycheck there. Like, you are not my family. And I wish that I had known that going in, and also that I didn't, like, link my identity to what I was doing to make a living. You know? And that's something out of college, you're ready to get the job you're gonna get for the rest of your life. And like, that's just not how it happens, thank God, you know? You get this job and that job, and eventually you find your way. And your identity is not the paycheck you get, but, you know, your place in your community and your relationship with your family and your friends. And like, that's what makes you, you know, an important person in your world, not like whatever job you get. So I always just try to keep that in mind now, too. They're not your family.
Yeah, adulting isn't easy.
No, it's not. I mean, you got to get along with them. There are family dynamics. You have to get along with this guy or whatever. You know, you make things work. But yeah, I'd rather hang out with my family than my coworkers any day.
Yeah. And you really didn't have a choice. When you were there. You spent all of your time, whether it was spare time, free time, or work time, with your coworkers.
Yes, that's right.
So that's another red flag, perhaps, that maybe they're a little too involved in your life.
Yeah, it's true. No, absolutely. But there are also good sides. I mean, it was incredibly fun. You know, of course, we're all young people running this huge business, making huge, important decisions down to what we were selling. I mean, the success of the company relied on us. We were young people knowing what young people wanted to buy. Designing everything. You know, Dove was a nerd. He didn't know about fashion. He used us to make this company so successful.
So as the book progresses, we see the arc of your response to the environment of American apparel. Can you talk about, we did talk a little bit about Dawn just before, but I'd like to talk about the character called Dawn and how your changing perceptions of the company may in fact be embodied in your perceptions and feelings regarding Dawn.
Yeah, I named her Dawn for a reason because, you know, she's so young and she's sort of this new kind of feminism. Yeah. What's the question?
How your perceptions of your environment at work, how your perceptions of Dawn as they changed throughout the course of working with her also kind of mirrored your changing perceptions of the environment.
Well, when Dawn is this young woman I hired when I just started, and then I see her much later in these very provocative ads, and I know who has shot the ads, and I know exactly what's going on. And that's really sort of the climax of the book. That's where I can't put my blinders on anymore. It's right in front of me. I'm, you know, my hands are dirty in this, and it was like a real wake-up call for me that I had to get out of there. Even though I didn't, I still stayed, which is a whole nother thing. But when I thought about what I would say to Dawn, you know, like, should I call Dawn? I actually did. I sent her a MySpace message. That was like, that's what Eric.
You're dating yourself.
Like, Dawn, yeah, seriously. That was the communication of the day. And, you know, I was like, your pictures are up in Miami, and I saw them. And she was like, yeah, aren't they great? Oh my God, you know, what could I have said to Dawn? You know, there was nothing that I could have said to her. You know, she would have just parroted back the same lines back to me that I had said to her. It was just, you know, like, this is a revolution. We're doing things differently here. You know, there was nothing I could say to her because I had already given her that spiel, you know? And
you called it the hustle, didn't you?
Yeah, the hustle. I mean, that's what we called it. Like, I mean, how much more do you need?
Yeah. As soon as you learned it was called the hustle, again, that's very telling.
Yeah, for sure.
So
that was a hard question. I don't know if I answered it, but I'm weaseling my way out because that was very difficult.
I did think that Dawn, when you circle back to Dawn, that was, to me, it was clear that was the moment you were like, okay, I can't ignore what I'm seeing here. And I think there could still be the opportunity for a discussion around whether she was in that with her eyes open and as her own sexual freedom and her own, you know, channeling her own way if that's what she was comfortable with.
Yeah.
But you clearly weren't at that point in time
Yeah.
anymore, and you couldn't avoid it. And that to me was a turning point in the book.
Yeah. Well, and also she was young. She was a
Yeah.
teenager. You know, I could not explain that away. You know, I could look at the girls my age who were 23 and say, you know, you're doing your own thing. But I mean, she was in high school. It was just so wrong.
So in the beginning of the book, you visit the factory. It's the first real exposure you have to the environment, and it was a wholly positive experience for you. You heard Roz yelling at some poor vendor on the other end of the line, telling him she can do whatever she wants, and you saw factory workers who were literally cheering for Dove when he walked into the room. And in that environment, it was his, no sweatshop environment. He evidently paid them well, and it was a wholly positive experience.
Yeah, totally.
Did that view ever change? Did you ever learn about some sort of underbelly that was going on in the factory, or was it always a completely different experience than you experienced in these shops?
It's interesting. We talk about it now. You know, every time you would go to the factory and Dove would walk through a sewing floor, all of the workers would get up and applaud. And it was so inspiring. And, they got free English lessons, and there would be like yoga routines, and like tranquil spa music would like warble down. And there was a masseuse who would go around at the end of the shift. You know, like working a machine all day is a hard job. And, it was he would ride the city buses just looking for people going to their sweatshop jobs and be like, don't even go, come with me, I'm gonna hook it up. And he did. And we made a profit. We made millions of dollars by treating people well and giving them what they need. And he is still doing that with his new company, Los Angeles Apparel. The factory location has moved. He has the same exact seamstresses working for him there. They defend him. They fight for him. He's like I say, it's just not a black and white. There are so many polarities. And they would say he is a very good man. They got different treatment than the retail girls, But I still believe in the business model, that early business model, so inspiring. We need those jobs here. We need those jobs in America. We could do it. I saw how easily it could be done by this crazy man who didn't even know what he was doing, and he did it. And, with a staff of 20-year-old girls working for him. And we could do that again. It's just such a shame that he had to ruin it.
It's
because
amazing.
it was a model. It was a business model.
Yeah, it's amazing what he could have done if he put his evil to good use. Right?
Absolutely, yes.
And I did a little bit of research on him because I was astonished that the man was still walking the streets, quite honestly. Mm-hmm. And I knew that he opened LA Apparel, and I also read that he was ignoring many, many workplace safety violations, and they shut him down.
Yes, this is the best story. So Dove, he's laying low. He's been ousted from his company in 2015. The company folds because really without Dove, it couldn't be successful. Without Dove and the girls, these businessmen in suits, like how are they going to run this like cutting edge company? So without Dove and the girls, it just totally folded. But where was I going with this? Sorry.
Dove in his workplace, he ignored. Even though the workers loved him, he really did ignore, particularly in 2020, throughout the COVID pandemic, ignored all these safety violations, and they shut him down.
So then he comes back during COVID. He's like, I've got this new factory. Y'all hate me, but I'm going to make these masks. I'm going to make masks all day long. I'm going to make them right here in America. We're going to have them right now. And he did. He made tons and tons of masks. And there was a huge outbreak because he was taking no precautions. There were pieces of cardboard between the sewing machines, and there was a huge outbreak. He was shut down, and 3 workers died. But still, he's unstoppable, man. He just kept on going. But yeah, I have one of those masks. Yeah. He's very smart. He got great press from that. The New York Times, here's Dove Charney saving the day. And then a week later, no, Dove Charney wasn't saving the day. He was greedy. He didn't look after his employees, and they got sick.
Yeah, he was opportunistic, and yet that was often a word used for others.
Yes. Anytime there was a harassment lawsuit, opportunists. But he truly was the biggest opportunist.
Yes. So bringing me back to the lawsuits, just to give the audience who haven't had the chance to read the book in its entirety, Dove Charney did defend at least 5 sexual harassment lawsuits while he was running American Apparel. It ultimately did lead to the ruination of American Apparel and, frankly, I believe his own personal disgrace. When one of the lawsuits was dismissed, you discussed this in the book, his reaction to the team, I believe it was at the Sunset store, I felt the entire scene was manic.
Oh, totally.
He was absolutely jubilant in the fact that he had won a lawsuit, and then in the flip of a switch, he ended up almost attacking, certainly so verbally, other employees to test their loyalty. Why do you think it took so long for the board of directors to ultimately shut him down? I mean, that was the environment that was in going on, and he actually went around the room and said, "Are you offended by me? Are you offended by me?" And everyone's on the spot, and they have to say, no, Dove, you're great. Just ask yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
So, I mean, it took so long for the company to catch on and then oust him ultimately, I think, 14 or 15.
Yeah. It was because of how much money the company was making, and it was all working up until a certain point. He would pay out these sexual harassment lawsuits. He's never been charged criminally. These lawsuits, and in the beginning, the lawsuits did seem a little opportunistic. Some of the women would be like, I worked in the store and they were using foul language. I worked in the store and there was a Hustler cover on the wall. We would have vintage Hustler magazines on the wall. And it's like, yeah, this is the fashion industry. This is what you're getting yourself into. And that's the line that he sort of, walked. Well, this is the fashion industry. We sell underwear. Why can't I wear my underwear to work and only my underwear to work? Oh, okay, I guess. So those sort of things worked. We got a lot of publicity. We were raking in the money. But once those harassment lawsuits that he would pay out started building, money was just hemorrhaging, and these suits that came in were just like, we got to get him out of here. But as soon as they did, that was really when the company just totally nosedive, because it couldn't last without him.
So we do need to maybe leave some time for some audience questions if you have, but I do have one more question.
Sure.
I know that this book is something that has just really opened my eyes to the millennial generation and when they came out of school, and it's just a different experience. And the book is taking off. For those of you that have read the article that was written by our own Kelly Clisham, that was a fantastic article.
Truly fantastic.
She also alluded to the fact that Amazon has purchased the movie rights to this book, which is a phenomenal, phenomenal success for you.
Thank you.
So other than working on the making of that film, what's next for you? Now that you've got us hooked, I mean, you've got our attention. You can't stop now.
Yes. Yes, the movie's so exciting, and we're working at getting a good script now, and we have a wonderful young actress attached, and it's extremely exciting. But I'm really focused on book 2. I want to write another memoir. I just feel like I'm nonfiction. Like we were talking about, I don't want to write, real life interests me, So I'm working on a book now that revolves around a kind of wild rumor panic that happened here in the Valley in the mid-90s. And it springs from this incident at my high school. And it was a very formative event for me. At the time, I was going to be a journalist, and I sort of saw what journalism was kind of about, and it turned me off, which is, I think, why I like memoir. I want to be vulnerable. I want to tell the truth. This is the truth. It's my truth. Some of the girls I wrote about are like, that's not how it happened. I'm like, well, then you write your book and tell me how it happened, because this is my story, and this is how it happened to me. So I'm really interested in investigating that, and also different memories of the same event. You have ownership over your side of the story, but there's all different sides to everyone's story, and that side is just as true as mine can be, even if they're different. I want to look back on this inciting event in the 90s and talk to some of my friends who were there and see what they remember, and just sort of do this study on memory, and also sort of setting the story straight on this very strange incident that happened here.
Well, that sounds very intriguing.
Yeah, I didn't really give too much away, but
It's very intriguing. I can't wait.
Thank you.
So I would like to give some folks some time, but I'd just like for us all to thank you, Kate, so much for being here.
Thank you.
We are so lucky here at Wilkes to have you here and to share your